Hey there, Father Richard Collin here. During our recent interview with Dr. Scott Hahn, I asked him to share a message of hope with us for how to respond to this difficult time of the COVID pandemic. I hope you enjoy his response and stay tuned as I unpack this further at the end. For those who are struggling with COVID right now, with all the restrictions, what's a message of hope that you could give the people today?
Well, we hear in 2 Corinthians, Paul say that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. And COVID, like nothing in my life experience, has reminded us of our weakness, of our mortality, of the fact that it is inevitable that we are going to suffer and die, whether it's sooner or later. But from St. Joseph, we can see the patron of a happy and a holy death. But I would also say, in the face of COVID, what we recognize is that this disordered fear of suffering, of illness and dying is really the result of burying our faith. When we, dig it up, we're not exhuming a corpse that was once alive but now is dead. What we're doing is allowing the transformation of pain into passion. Suffering becomes sacrifice. The loss of life at Calvary becomes the gift of life in the Mass. And so we discover that, oh, okay, we're here for one reason, not just to get out of here and make it to heaven, but to become a saint in the process. So God is not only writing straight with crooked lines, God actually does more with our weakness by giving us his strength than what he does when we say, here, God, here are all my strengths, all my gifts, all my skills. He can work with them as well. But I think this pandemic is a painful but profound reminder that he can often do more with less, and that he's been doing that for a long time now, going all the way back to the Holy Family, fleeing to Egypt in the face of Herod. And every single other episode in the Gospels reminds us that it isn't like, oh, if only you would give me your strength, then I, as the Lord, would be finally able to. No, he really does more with less. And so as we give him our less, our weakness, our own mortality, I think what we'll discover is that it's more than just making lemonade from the lemons that life gives you. It is transforming human mortality into something that is truly and everlastingly divine. And again, we're not making this stuff up. This is not wishful thinking, not religious rhetoric. This is the reality that we will see face to face for a very long time. It's called eternity.
Dr. Scott Hahn is inviting us to take the whole difficulty of the COVID pandemic and to turn it into a prayer to God. One of my favorite prayer acronyms to help guide us on the journey of prayer is called the Pirate Prayer. It stands for a 4-letter acronym ARRR, and that's how you get the idea of pirate prayer, like R. And so it stands for acknowledge, relate, receive, respond. First, we're called to acknowledge. Scott Hahn is inviting us to acknowledge the pains, the weaknesses, our fears, anything that's going on. We're called to name them and acknowledge what's truly going on deep down inside. Second, we're called to relate this. We're called to relate it to God, to speak these fears and difficulties that we're struggling to God in a time of prayer. Once we relate these things to God and give them to him, we're called to receive. This is where we have to sit in silence and trust that God's going to speak to us. He's going to inspire us with a perspective of faith for all of these fears and difficulties and the weaknesses that we're facing during the COVID pandemic. Once we give time for God to speak to us in a receptivity of heart, then we're called to respond. What is the new perspective of faith, of hope, of love that I can do as a response of this time of prayer? I hope this acronym ARRR helps to give you a direction for how you can take the difficulties of the COVID pandemic and turn them into an experience of transformational prayer so that we can experience, as Dr. Hahn said in the words of St. Paul, that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. God bless you.